Most early American lives disappear into the silence of the records. A name, a date, a line on a faded census page. But every so often, one of those names begins to speak. John Spencer's life can be followed across 3 states, 3 frontiers, and 3 generations. A man who kept moving west, not for glory, not for fame, but because the world around him was changing and he refused to stand still. This is his story. John Spencer was born in the final years of the 18th century in Berkeley County, Virginia, a place where the Blue Ridge Mountains framed the horizon and the rhythms of life were shaped by farming, trade, and the slow push of settlement. By 1820, he appears in the census as a young husband and father, 2 daughters, a wife named Sarah, a household just beginning to take shape. But the census reveals something else. John was listed as engaged in commerce, not simply agriculture. In a rural Virginia community, that meant ambition. It meant movement. It meant a man who was not content with the life he was born into. And soon, that ambition would carry him far beyond Virginia's borders. In October of 1828, John and Sarah Spencer sold their land. The deed still survives, brittle, browned, and written in the careful script of a county clerk. At the bottom, where their signatures should be, there are only 2 marks, 2 simple X's. John Spencer could not write his name, neither could Sarah. But literacy had nothing to do with the decision they made that day. They were leaving the only home they had ever known, leaving family, leaving the familiar valleys of Berkeley County. The frontier was calling. By 1830, the Spencers appear in Champaign County, Ohio, part of a massive wave of Virginians who poured into the new state after the War of 1812. Ohio was opportunity, cheap land, fresh soil, a chance to start again. Here, John's family grew. More children, more land, more responsibility. But the pattern of his life was already set. John Spencer was a man who rebuilt without hesitation, a man who believed the next horizon always held something better. And once again, he would move. In the early 1840s, John sold his Ohio land and headed west a second time, this time into the brand new territory of Iowa. By 1850, he is recorded in Van Buren County as a farmer, working land that had only recently been open to American settlement. He had followed the great migration path of the 19th century, Virginia to Ohio to Iowa, 3 states, 3 frontiers, 3 chapters of a life shaped by the American push westward. But the records only tell us where he lived. They don't tell us who he was. For that, we turn to the stories. And once again, he would move. Decades after his death, a newspaper remembered John Spencer as a man of remarkable physical strength. A large, powerful man, they wrote, standing well over 6 feet tall. In his youth, he was known for his toughness, for his endurance, for the kind of frontier strength that came from long days, hard work, and a life lived outdoors. But something changed as he grew older. John Spencer became deeply religious, a devoted Methodist, respected by neighbors who saw in him a quiet wisdom that had nothing to do with reading or writing. He could not sign his name, but he could guide a community. He could raise a family. He could build a life on 3 different frontiers. To those who knew him, he was simply Uncle John. For that, we turn to the stories, and once again, he would move. John Spencer's legacy is written in the lives of his children. One daughter died young in Ohio, a reminder of how fragile frontier life could be. One son stayed in Iowa, carrying the Spencer name into the next generation. Another daughter traveled even farther west, to Oregon, continuing the family's tradition of pushing into new territory. Some stayed, some left, some were lost too soon. But all of them carried pieces of John's story with them. John Spencer's early years were marked by fights, challenges, and the rough company of frontier life. But marriage and fatherhood began to change him. He knew he needed a different path. He sought out a blacksmith preacher he trusted and asked what he should do. The preacher told him plainly, "Join the church. Leave the rough companions behind. Choose a better life." John did. In the words preserved in the 1909 newspaper, he later said, "Before conversion, I was willfully bad and devilishly active. Now I want to do good." It was the moment that reshaped the rest of his life, the moment that turned a fighter into a man of faith, a man of peace, and a man his community would come to call Uncle John. By the late 1870s, John Spencer's long life on the American frontier was drawing to a close. He appears in the 1870 census in Van Buren County, Iowa, still living among the rolling fields he had worked for decades. But when the 1880 census was taken, his name was gone. Somewhere in that 10-year span, between one enumeration and the next, John Spencer's journey came to its quiet end. He had lived through the birth of a nation, the opening of the frontier, and the transformation of America from a cluster of states to a continental power. From the mountains of Virginia, to the fields of Ohio, to the open prairies of Iowa, John Spencer kept moving west until there was nowhere left to go, and though the exact date of his passing is lost, his family remembered his final words. "Just like a big clearing." A fitting end for a man who spent his entire life searching for one.
Follow Brick Walls and Buckeyes for Ohio genealogy and the stories of your ancestors.